Welcome back, friends, to another build slash guide video for New World. Today, we're going to be covering DPS in the Rise of the Angry Earth expansion, and in my opinion, what is one of the strongest DPS builds in the game right now. Now, you guys might be able to faintly make it out up in the top right, but we are on the PTR build, the test server. At time of recording, it's about 2 weeks prior to when the Rise of the Angry Earth expansion comes out, so there might be a few changes between when this video was recorded and the actual expansion release. If there is anything major, I'll let you guys know in the comments down below. We might even have an updated build guide video pinned in the comments if we need to. But for this particular build, we are going to be using Greatsword as our primary weapon and Spear as our sort of backup utility weapon. So Spear is there for its, like I say, utility. We have Skewer to apply bleeds and weakens. We have Cyclone, which gives us a pretty nice heal. And then we also have Perforate to apply some debuffs. And then if we want to just pump out some mega big damage, that's what the Greatsword's for. Of course, we are going to be utilizing some of the new artifact items that were brought in with the Rise of the Angry Earth expansion, in particular Serenity. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First of all, let's take a look at the stats, the weapon mastery, and the equip load. So kicking things off with the stats, or the attributes, we have 200 strength, 350 dexterity, and 100 constitution. If you wanted to go a more aggressive version of this build, I think you could drop down to 50 constitution, go up to 250 strength. I mean, you might even want to go 5 constitution. I know some people like to do that and just go like 300 strength, 350 dexterity, if you really want to go all out. But I think this is honestly cutting it pretty good. The dexterity actually benefits the spear more than it does strength. The sword like sort of scales evenly off of both of them, but this particular point here, 15% crit chance when empowered. We're probably going to get empowered pretty often with the Greatsword, and if we're playing with a Void Gauntlet in our team, so I opted to go for this because the other options in strength didn't really seem that good. So dexterity 350 and then 200 strength just to also provide quite a bit of damage to the Greatsword and Spear as well, and 100 constitution to keep us alive. Taking a look at the weapon mastery, first and foremost for the Greatsword, we want to pick up the Unrelenting Onslaught. This gives us a lot of cooldown reduction, especially when we large charged heavy attacks, which is something you're going to be looking to do a lot with the Greatsword. You basically want to get into Onslaught mode, which will activate here, and then your charged heavies are almost like twice as fast. I think they nerfed it to be only 50% faster, but it's still pretty good. So that's the reason why we're sticking to the left-hand side skill tree. Relentless Rush is a really, really good ability. It activates an Empower, which we talked about. That's important for the dexterity. It also, you get the cooldown reduction when you kill enemies, 50% cooldown reduction. We've gone for Skyward Slash with 1 upgrade just to do a little bit extra damage. You could also look to pick up Sickening Slash if you need some disease, dropping potentially like Keen Posture or something like that. And then we have Roaring Rupture over here with a few upgrades. This is sort of like a utility ability. One of the best things about this is when you're in Onslaught stance, it pulls foes towards you so you can sort of group people up. It also applies a Weaken and you become uninterruptible, which is very nice as well. And it can cleanse 2 debuffs. So quite a lot of nice utility over here. We have Unflinching Blade to sort of get down here, but also getting Grit while we're doing heavy attacks is nice. Some of these passives, not so good, but we just picked up what we could over here to sort of you know, flesh out the skill tree. As with all of these build guides, you can sort of tweak things as you find them to be working for you, but this is what I'm recommending here. Now moving over to the actual gear, and first of all, let's talk about the artifacts, obviously the most exciting things. The first one is Serenity. Now in my opinion, this is probably one of the best artifacts in the game. I think anybody who's using a Greatsword is going to be using Serenity. If it gets nerfed, then maybe we don't see it getting used as much, but right now, the Balance Blade sort of unique perk that it has is so good. It's when you're in offensive stance, 2% empower per attack. When you're in defense stance, 2%. In fact, I don't even know if these are related to the stances. I think these just kick in all the time. So 2% empower per attack for 5 seconds. So that's, and there's 10 stacks, so that's 20% empower, and also 20% fortify. So as you're in combat, you're just able to like sort of increase your armor and increase your damage. Really, really strong. We also have a Gambit gem in here as well for 15% damage while your stamina is not full, which is actually pretty easy to pop and activate because as soon as we go into Onslaught mode, every time we do a heavy attack, it uses part of our stamina like that. You can see our stamina sort of going down. So the Gambit gem is actually pretty easy to maintain in a Greatsword. We can also just dodge as well to activate it. Then we have Trenchant Strikes, Trenchant Crits, and Refreshing Move. All of these are non-negotiable. You have to have these on the Greatsword, but they turn out to be pretty good as well because as I say, we're usually doing heavy attacks and cooldown reduction is also pretty good as well. Taking a look at our artifact jewelry, we have Endless Thirst. Honestly, I don't think there's any artifacts that are super good with this build. One artifact that you could consider that's a bit spicy is Blood Drinker, because this has 25% less damage, which is not great for DPS, but it does have 25% lifesteal. So I think if you're playing like a solo build or in PvP, this could be really good for that sort of sustain. But honestly, none of the artifacts are particularly good in the game right now for it, so we just went for Endless Thirst, because you get this from the Season Pass. As long as you finish it out, you get Endless Thirst, but we will cover how to get Serenity and other artifacts sort of towards the end of the video. Nothing too important to say about here. We've got Fortifying Toast, so whenever we drink a potion, we get some extra Fortify and damage reduction. When we pop our Heartrune, we get a little heal. You can change some perks on this if you take it to the Gypsum Kiln, but the artifact perk just basically is when we drink a health potion, it's stronger, but the cooldown's a little bit longer. Then we have the Attuned Leather Pants as our armor artifact. These have plus 50 Magnify. Magnify is basically a flexible stat, so whatever you put the most points into, whatever your highest stat is, that's what it kind of becomes. So these can be dexterity legs, but if we need them to be strength legs, then we can simply respec, put a few more points into strength, and these will become strength-based legs as well. So nice and flexible if you want to play with a sort of different build. And they also have well-rounded as well, which is plus 10 to all other attributes. So they're effectively giving like another 40 stats on top of that, because they give plus 50 to whatever your sort of main thing that you're going into, and then 40 to dexterity, 40 to, well, in this case 10, and then 10 to strength, 10 to intelligence, 10 to focus, and 10 to constitution as well. Pretty good. A lot of stats that we get from these legs. I do like them quite a bit. One thing to point out is the bottom perk on these legs is random. So you can change this at the Gypsum Kiln, and obviously Exhausted Infected Throw is not something we really want in this build, but I ran out of Gypsum Orbs to change the perk, so I would probably replace this with the health perk or something like that, something that's just generally universally good. Speaking of health perks, let's take a look at the rest of our armor. We have a light helmet here. Oh, and we should also cover, we are going to be in a light equip load. Being in a light equip load is a 20% base damage bonus, so we can just hit even harder. We also get access to the dodge roll as well, which is quite nice. If you want to be a little bit more tanky, you could consider going into a medium equip load, but for the purpose of this build, we're just going to focus on a light equip load, primarily for PvE DPS. So with that in mind, we have a light helmet with health, elemental aversion, and freedom. Health is a great perk. I think you want to try and get this as much of your armor as possible. Elemental aversion is going to help you out in mutated expeditions, and also when you're fighting like mages and stuff. And then freedom just helps you in a pinch. If you get stunned or some sort of CC, it can break you out. Speaking of breaking out from CC, we also have Relentless Freedom. So we're going to talk about the perks that we have in our armor here as well, or the weapon perks rather. Relentless Freedom, it says, activating Relentless Rush removes roots and slows, increases the critical hit chance. So this is a really, really good perk for the Greatsword. Removing roots and slows is great utility in both PvE and PvP. And of course, we've got health and refreshing, trying to max out, not going above 4 stacks of refreshing, but getting to 4 stacks of refreshing. But generally, the most important perks on your armor, by the way, if you don't have like absolutely best in slot, is going to be health and elemental aversion, health and relentless rush. The refreshing is kind of sort of extra. Then we take a look at some other perks we have here. We have fortifying perforate, so health and fortifying perforate. Perforate increases, basically gives you fortify for every sort of jab that you land of this, which increases your armor, so it's going to increase your survivability, which is quite nice. And we have leeching cyclone as well, so Cyclone hits heal you for 35% weapon damage, max 3 targets, and of course there's the health. And we're also rocking this extra perk. If you can get it, pick it up. Enchanted Ward or Elemental Aversion would both be good to just give you a little bit more damage reduction and keep you alive. We already covered the legs, and like we say, we probably want to replace this bottom perk here with health as well. Moving over to our weapons, we've already covered the artifact sword and its bonkersness, but the spear here is Enfeebling Skewer, Rogue, and Keenly Jagged. Now you can kind of change these perks around as you see fit, so if you don't feel like you're able to get in a lot of backstabs, because this is more of a PvE thing, you know, when the tank is facing the enemies away from you, you get a lot of backstab damage, but maybe you want to replace this with Vicious or some sort of attunement perk, could also be good as well. Enfeebling Skewer, however, does feel like it is a must-have perk. Skewer hits apply weaken, reducing target's damage by 47%. A 47% damage reduction is going to be great for your team. You can apply this to bosses and enemies. It just makes the enemies hit like so much less. So if we go ahead and just get hit by like one of these mobs here, let's try and see how much damage we take. So there we go. That was 1,457. If we hit him again with the skewer now, there we go. There was only 544. Now, I'm not sure if that was the same attack. I don't think it actually was. So that's going to be kind of hard to prove with two enemies here. But effectively, what we're saying is weaken is good. Reducing the amount of damage that enemies do to you is pretty powerful, and it can help out your team a lot. And then Keenly Jagged, every time we get a crit, we leave a bleed on them. Just a little bit of extra sort of DPS there as well. Moving over to our jewelry. Honestly, it's got to be said, on the test server, it's kind of hard to get good jewelry. So We will sort of talk more in depth about amulets later on in the video when we cover gems, but health, refreshing, stamina recovery, these are just some like good all-round perks. You could also look to take the shirking dot cleanse. It's when you're in a light equip load, you lose a dot. Stamina recovery, basically refilling your stamina pool when you get below 50% health can help you a lot with survivability. However, one thing that we're not seeing in this amulet here is protection perks, and like I say, we'll go over that in a little bit, but things like nature protection and thrust protection and void protection, yeah, we'll cover that when we get to the gems section. Moving over to the ring, we have hearty, refreshing, and leeching. One thing that I think is very important to get on the ring that we don't actually have here, because it's, again, kind of awkward to get jewelry on the test server, is a damage perk. So you can get thrust damage or slash damage, I think, in replace of the refreshing or even the leeching would be good. So hearty plus slash damage or hearty plus thrust damage would be great. And then leeching as an added benefit, or potentially keen awareness would also be good here also. And then finally we have the earring. We're using Endless Thirst, but if you wanted to just use a non-artifact earring, I think something with refreshing toast and empowering toast would be more than good enough, honestly. Let's talk about the Heartrune options for DPS. Now I am actually using the Brutal Heartrune of Primal Fury, so this is the new Heartrune that we get in the sort of Rise of the Angry Earth expansion. If you don't know about Heartrunes because you haven't played New World in a long time, we'll have a separate video about those linked up in the top right. But effectively, it's another ability that you can use. It's just an ability, and this one makes you go into like crazy monkey mode and you can smash people. I'm not entirely sure if this is going to be actually giving us more damage, you know, when we turn into monkey form. It might be better to just stick with the spear and the greatsword. I think some other good options when it comes to DPS Heartrunes is Firestorm. In particular, Brutal Firestorm does quite a lot of damage. You could also run Detonate as well. The Brutal Detonate, typically the brutal option of Heartrunes. This one does rend you, so it increases your damage that you take by 50% almost, or reduces your armor. So yeah, you just take a lot more damage, but it does explode and do quite a lot of damage in return. So Brutal Heartrune of Detonate is pretty common for DPS players, but like I say, a bit more of a safe option when you don't get rendered is the Heartrune, or we can go monkey mode with Brutal Heartrune and Primal Fury just to do some big damage and sort of start smashing. Now we're going to go into gems for this build. Now I've opted to sort of split my gems here, so we've got half diamonds and half malachite. So diamonds, when slotted into the armor, give you a little bit of physical damage absorption, and they give you quite a bit of physical and a little bit of elemental, and then malachite is kind of the reverse of that, where it's mostly elemental and a little bit of physical. You could also just do like opals and onyx as well, to sort of half and half, but effectively we wanted to split our damage absorption, so there wasn't anything that we were particularly weak against. But this is sort of like the one-size-fits-all. If you are going to jump into a particular type of content, you may want to mix your gems up. So for example, let's cover mutated expeditions. Right now there are 4 different types of mutations you can get at the top here. So we have Eternal, Hellfire, Icebound, and Overgrown. Eternal is void damage, Icebound is frost damage, Hellfire is fire damage, and Overgrown is nature damage. And you want to change your gems to that sort of corresponding element. So if I was going to go sign up, if I wanted to go do this dungeon here, and jump in on this difficulty 3 lobby, then I would need to make sure that I have a lot of void damage protection, because we're going to be taking a ton of void damage. So in order to best equip myself for that, I'm actually going to start replacing all of my armor gems with these void gems here. Now this can get expensive, so you do have to bear this in mind. You know, changing a full set of gems every time can be quite tedious. Sadly, this is still part of the game that, you know, we don't really need to change all of our gear for different types of content. You know, we don't need Corrupted Ward, Angry Earth Ward, Lost Ward, Beast Ward. You know, they've removed all of those. We don't even need Resilient for PvP either. That's just sort of baked into your character now, but you are still going to have to change your gems if you want to be the most efficient. So now that we've got a full set of void gems here, we have 48% void damage absorption. However, as we covered earlier, you can also rock an amulet as well to give you even more protection. So we have an amulet here that has health and void protection, and by slapping that on, we are now sitting at 62% void damage resistance, which I think is far over the cap, to be honest, but that's going to keep you pretty safe in a void mutation. And like I say, you would want to change this amulet and the gem corresponding, so ideally we would have health and nature protection here, and that would cover us if we were going into a nature mutation. And then you can imagine if we have health and fire protection, health and ice protection, and the gem that's in the amulet would also need to change corresponding to the protection as well, if that makes sense. So that is kind of like the meta for mutated dungeons, and probably going to continue to be the meta for a while now unless Amazon changes it. From the PvP side of things though, if you're jumping into Outpost Rush or 3v3 Arena, it's pretty common to see quite a lot of thrust damage. In my experience, blunderbusses and spears do seem to be quite rife. We're also seeing the rise of musket as well. All of these weapons do a lot of thrust damage, so having a thrust protection amulet with a thrust gem, which is the emerald if I'm not mistaken, let me double check, yeah, a cut pristine emerald, and slotting some emeralds in your armor I think is going to be a good go as well. So again, your gems are kind of dynamic and they're going to shift and change depending on what sort of content you're going into. So for PvP, I think quite a lot of thrust damage absorption, maybe some slash damage protection because you're going to be going against a lot of serenities as well, could be a good idea. For mutations, you need to focus on that particular element that mutation has. So again, void or frost, fire, nature. But if you do just want to try and do a one-size-fits-all, again, you are going to be weaker, and sometimes people might not invite you into the group if you don't have the right set of gems that they're expecting to see. But I think diamonds, you can't go wrong with those. Malachite, and honestly just opals and onyx as well. I don't actually have any cut pristine onyx. Those are also good. Last thing to talk about is our consumables. You have basically a choice of 3 different types of food now. There is banana bread, which gives you strength. We also have one for dexterity, which is banana pudding. And then lastly, we have one for constitution, which is banana parfait. So whichever stat you're needing to boost up the most, you can pop one of these. It gives you 48 of the relevant stats. So constitution or strength or dexterity, whatever you're feeling you're missing the most in your build and you need more of. Other consumables you're going to want to rock as a DPS are the honing stones. So you can apply this to your weapon to increase your weapon damage for 40 minutes. A coating in particular for dungeons is going to be really good. So this beast coating right now, we're in a very heavy beast area. So applying the beast coating and then weapon swapping and applying the beast coating is going to give us a lot of damage. Like I say, the honing stone's good. Also a ward potion depending on the enemy types you're going up against. So again, for dungeons, this is very good. If you're doing Lazarus, popping something like an ancient ward potion to decrease the amount of damage you take from ancients by 10% for 40 minutes. For the new dungeon, Savage Divide, this is pretty good. If you're going into the depths or Tempest Heart, we'll have a link in the description down below to a resource that shows you the different enemy types per dungeon so you know which ward potion to bring in. But you could also just ask global and help chat as well. People will probably give you a few tips and tricks there. Lastly, we want to make sure that we have health potions and regeneration potions. And if you want to take some extra safety, you can rock the Oak Flesh Bomb. I believe you make this at the Outfitter, unless they changed it. It gives you physical damage absorption for a short amount of time, or you can run Gemstone Dust, which gives you elemental damage absorption for a short amount of time, depending on, again, what sort of damage you're going to be taking. These consumables are very good. Oh, and we forgot to mention also Desert Sunrise, reducing the duration of damage over time effects. Nice little sort of survivability boost there as well. You typically want to have those popped when you're going into some sort of challenging content. Now, all we have left to talk about is the abilities. So typically, I think you will always want to be opening up with a skewer to apply the enfeebling skewer, also get some bleeds going in the enemy. And then after that, probably get the rends going with the perforate and then switch over to the greatsword to start doing some damage. Cyclone, you can kind of leave there as and when you need a heal because you got that leeching cyclone perk. It also gives you stamina back as well. So yeah, typically skewer into perforate followed by some big old greatsword DPS. So skewer, perforate, and then spin through. We've already killed the enemy before we can do anything else, but get the idea. So open with spear, switch to greatsword, use a onslaught ability, and then start swinging. And if you need to, you can obviously pop rupture to group enemies up, but make sure that you use a red ability before you use a blue ability, or at least that you do one charged heavy, because one charged heavy will also move you into onslaught stance because of aggressive shift. So yeah, spear into greatsword. After you're in the greatsword, either red ability or heavy attack into rupture to group the enemies up, and then just start, you know, swinging, basically trying to do heavy attacks as much as possible as sort of your spam filler until abilities are ready to go on either the spear or the greatsword again. So that is going to do it for this DPS build guide here. Now you guys might be asking, Baggins, what about the fire staff or the bow or the musket or the blunderbuss? I want to play with those weapons. Is it only spear and greatsword? No, I don't think that this is hands down, like there's no other builds. I just think this is a very strong one, especially with the addition of Serenity. It's just going to do a lot of damage. But if you guys are interested in some PvP builds, if you're interested in something with a bow, something with a blunderbuss, something with the fire staff, make sure you click the subscribe button. We're going to have a bunch of other builds coming out. In particular for PvP, I generally don't focus too much on that, but I will link to a couple of great YouTubers who do a lot of PvP stuff as well. I highly recommend you go check out their content, but I am myself also going to have many more builds coming out on this YouTube channel over the coming weeks. So again, subscribe for those. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you go ahead and click the like button. If you want any more Baggins, you want to see me playing some builds live, ask me further questions. We're streaming pretty much every single day after the expansion comes out. Link to the stream in the description down below. But with that all said, I will catch you guys all in the next video.